Hello, I'm Gary Carson Hull. Welcome to Los Altos History. Our program today is the role of the History House Auxiliary, how it took shape and came to be what it is today. With us today are two prominent Los Altos women who helped shape the preservation policies of the city and increased our awareness of our historic resources. Geraldine Kavanaugh was appointed to the Los Altos Historical Commission in 1974, has served 2 terms, and has remained very active in preservation and educational efforts since that time. Pinky Whalen has served 2 terms on the Historical Commission from 1976 to 1985. She's currently serving her 2nd term as president of the History House Auxiliary. She's been a driving force behind many of the auxiliary's successful endeavors. Good evening, Jerry. Let's start with you. You were one of the original 7 people chosen by the City Council to serve as a historical commissioner. Why did the city form the Historical Commission to begin with?
They had inherited the Smith House, which was determined to become, they had decided to make into a museum, and they needed an historical commission to collect information about, keep track of Los Altos history, and help form that and establish it as a museum for a collection of artifacts and data and information connected with Los Altos history. And they had originally decided, put the call out for 5 members, and so many of us turned out so marvelous in our interviews, and we were so much in demand they couldn't decide which 2 to bounce, and so they just simply took the prerogative of changing it to a 7-man committee.
I think, Jerry, we have some footage now on our monitor of the property, of the Smith land holdings. Is that not what we're looking at here?
Yes. I believe it was originally when J. Gilbert Smith came there with his mother. It was originally 5 acres, and he increased it eventually to 10 acres. He built the house and established the orchard. He was one member of his family that wasn't going to go to Stanford. He was helping to support his brothers and sisters in that endeavor of going to Stanford, and he took care of his mother. That's some of the old cars that they had at that particular time. He actually built the house from local woods, from lumber that was milled down in the area of Stevens Creek, and had the logs felled and cut into timber, and he brought them up here on a wagon. We may even have a picture of it here this evening.
I know that the acquisition of the property came upon the death of the Smiths. Can you tell us a little bit about how that came about?
Yes, I believe it was in 1951 that they sold the property to the city of Los Altos, but they retained life rights. And Mr. Smith died about 1966, and Mrs. Smith continued to live there until her death, and she remained interested in what was going on in Los Altos and kept active, and came downtown to see new shops that would open, such as that. And she died about 1972, I believe it was. And that was when it came, 1972 or 73, I'm not quite sure on that
This is a picture of J.G. and Margaret?
And Margaret Smith. And that's a wonderful, that picture hangs in the History House now.
In the History House.
And there's a portrait, a painted portrait of them too, that was done by a local artist. It hangs right in the stairway. Then when the city took over, they had to decide what exactly they were going to do with it and the property. And they determined then, a lot of people were very responsible for making it into a museum, but I think it was our mayor, Audrey Fisher, who was very instrumental in seeing that the city council really got off their duffs and got to it and saw to it that it was what it was supposed to be. And
who were the other 6 founding persons on the historical
there was
commission?
there was Lee Lynch, Kay Daly, Kay Pavlina, Kay Payne, Francis Emery. How many have I called off? Did I miss anyone?
Karen Bartholomew?
Karen Bartholomew, wonderful young lady that lived in Los Altos.
I understand over the past 10 years there's been about 20 historical commissioners altogether.
Yes, we've been very fortunate to have good personnel volunteer for that type of thing. I think it's a great way to help be part of what's going on in the city. And if you're really interested in history, it gives you a good chance to get in there and see what's going on. And it's amazing how much you feel a part of it if you're discovering it. And I really think that we newcomers, Pinky and I have been on been in Los Altos for about 27 years. I think you're 2 years newer. We newcomers actually have been more interested in some of the history and in uncovering it and making it straight than a lot of the old timers. But the old timers are great for volunteering, and they bring forth a lot of good information, that type of thing.
Well, Pinky, you've been involved in the History House Auxiliary. How is the auxiliary different from the commission? Jerry's been talking about the commission and.
Well, the History House Auxiliary was formed about 1974. And the auxiliary is responsible for fundraising, for maintenance, for the garden, for the general upkeep of the house.
Of the History House itself.
Of the History House, for getting people in the community to join the auxiliary, to be docents in the house.
How many members do you currently have?
We have about 60 right now. That includes the benefactors.
Oh, good. What kind of things are involved in what are the requirements for membership? If someone in the community, maybe watching this show, decided that they would like to be a member of the auxiliary, what kind of things are you looking for?
Well, it's not real complicated. We'll take everybody. And what we need members because the house is open 2 days a week and we need people to staff the house. It is opened on request. We have a lot of scout groups that'll come in, but they can only come in at certain times. So we have to draw from the auxiliary members who come in on those days when the house isn't open.
So basically, people that are at all interested in history and would like to help in something like this, you have a core of people that can help train them to be docents and to learn about the house itself.
Sure, and there are a lot of things they can do. They can help with the garden. They can help with the maintenance of the house. We had the auto club had held their meetings there, and they put in a new sink for us. They've been really helpful. But there have been different groups.
This is the antique auto club?
Yeah. They don't meet there anymore because they have too many members and there isn't enough room to accommodate them. But the Los Altos Garden Club was very instrumental in getting the gardens going, the hummingbird
that wonderful
garden.
Hummingbird.
Right, right.
Nancy Eaton, I can remember her working many.
And Louise Blakey, who is the hummingbird authority in the United States, was very responsible for getting that off the ground.
So you've talked about some of the people that have been in the auxiliary. What kind of interest and talents do auxiliary members bring to the auxiliary? I understand that Ed Woodward and his wife were...
came to Los Altos in the 20s as a young boy, and he has so much information that he has established a walking tour of downtown Los Altos.
I think we have some footage of it. Yes, here it is right here on the monitor. We have some footage of the walking tour.
Well, it's a wonderful tour, and not only he has wonderful stories to tell when you're taking the walk.
He used to tether his cow on the corner of State and First Street, where my shop used to stay, where my shop used to be.
On the corner of that lot where the kids used to play football. And Herman Peters, that's Colin's father, was the first scoutmaster. His home, their home was over on Orange Avenue. And Herman then became a real estate man. He was a teacher, a remarkable individual, and an author. And but he loved to just kind of relax, and so he had a little real estate office next to the grocery store over here for many years, and he was the notary public for the town. And so if anybody wanted anything signed, you'd go up to offer Herman Peters 50 cents, and he'd say, "Oh, that's all right, Eddie, we don't charge for this." A wonderful individual.
Just great.
Yes, I've been on the walking tour with Ed, and he gives a lot of anecdotes that really make it come alive, makes the history come alive.
We were sorry when he moved.
A great deal of depth.
Yeah.
Right. I understand that there is an extensive archives at the History House. How is that taken care of, and what kind of plans does the auxiliary have for maintaining that archive and keeping it for the future? I know that I've gone into the History House and looked up things on my own property that's a historic property in the city, and there's an extensive amount of data there.
Lee Lynch did a very good job of establishing the archival cataloging system, and I believe some of the members, you probably, Pinky could probably
some of
tell
the
you
members have been trained to do that.
follow through. And
So
keep up
if
with it.
people within our community were interested in going in and looking up something on their particular property, there would be people there to help them.
And if people
Do
have
that.
things too, if they come across early calendars showing advertising in Los Altos, that type of thing, come across things like that that are pertinent, we'd love to have them donated.
At this point, the auxiliary is working with the commission to find a part-time director to keep these kinds of things up to date that have had specific training in that.
Sort of a overall
Yeah.
coordinator.
Yeah.
Great, great. Well, along that line, I assume then there are financial needs for the auxiliary and for the commission. What kinds of, I understand that you have fundraisers for the...
Well, we've had some great fundraisers. I think one of the ones that was a lot of fun when we got together with LACT, and they gave us
Right.
we saw
that was
Paint Your Wagon.
Paint Your Wagon.
Right.
And Jerry and
Yeah.
I made chili for 100 people.
And cornbread
Right.
until it came out of our
Yeah.
ears.
That was one of the first
And-
things I attended
Yeah,
in Los
that
Altos.
was-
It was
great.
delightful. I think LACT is a terrific theater group, for one thing.
Yes.
So that everybody that night got plenty for their money. They got a good theater presentation and a good dinner.
Marion Jackson has been very helpful. We've had a fashion show, and she's provided the clothes for the last couple of
I
years.
think we have some footage of that.
And they come, and the ladies make wonderful cookies, and there's tea, and we decorate the house with, they have a couple of Christmas trees.
And the kids. Children are just
And the,
This is the fashion show?
This is the
kindergarten
fashion
at
show.
St. Simon's.
yeah, it's a wonderful tea, and the auxiliaries make food and for sale. We have a
Brody will be
boutique.
walking with his mother, Claudia. Brody is in kindergarten at Loyola. Would you like to start walking through, Brody, so that the ladies and gentlemen can see
I think
your
one of the
outfit?
things that impressed me
Yeah.
about the tea is the way the house is decorated.
These tops,
beautifully
layer
decorated
over.
in turn of
Thank you,
century.
Brody.
the auxiliary has
Decorations.
a tree trimming.
Yeah, we have a tree trimming party in November.
Leah's mom is down
Besides,
here
that
waiting
house is
for her. Her
enchanted.
name's Lori. She's going to walk with
Everything
Leah.
comes out.
Jerry and I are convinced that Mrs. Smith is still there.
Mary
Right.
is,
Leah
and
goes
she
to school
looks
at
over, and
Children's
Margaret
House
too.
in Los Altos.
Both
Her
nurses.
gas business is in the Los Altos Pharmacy. The fleece top is trimmed with bright pink corduroy. Great.
You know, it's awfully great fun to be part of this too. And the children, just the biggest
We've
joy.
seen several generations of families of this, great-grandchildren, and
Kip is age
Larry
4
Nelson had his
and he's watching
grandchildren
his
there
mom.
in the show.
It's wonderful to see children there because the
Very
Smiths
interesting about Smith
were
is he
elderly
lives
when
on
they
Mount Hamilton
older.
at the Lick
Older
Observatory.
got married.
He
And
goes
I
to
think
school in
Mrs.
the
Smith
Child
was about
Development
54,
Lab
so
at
they
San
didn't have
Jose
children.
State.
at
Right.
the
And his interests are gymnastics and ballet.
Well, I know that my oldest son is very enchanted with the place. I've taken him there on numerous occasions, and he just gets very involved in looking things up and finding names of streets and trying to figure out where they came from.
What is delightful about that house, which is really rich, is that it's so original. It hadn't been changed or
Right.
remodeled. The kitchen, the walls, the hallway, those things are all there.
Even the curtains in the living room are the original.
Those are one of the
right?
few original things to the house. And Janet Rush and I, who was one of the, not one of the original commissioners, but she was very, very active on the commission and in the newsroom. She and I stitched those curtains and resurrected them from threads.
His interests are hockey, and his favorite food is hot dogs. We all love a good hot dog. Bache is wearing the newest in distressed denim from Choosy. Both the vest and the pants our next model is Tara Meyer. That's age 7, and she is in the second grade at Loyola School. Would you like to come down, Tara? You can walk through.
Another fundraiser is the good old summertime.
What are some of the other fundraisers that have been successful?
Well, last year we had 2, and one was kind of a low-keyed barbecue. We had some country music and spare ribs and chicken. But the biggest thing was last September we had a wonderful antique show. And it was called California Country, and B. Tier, who was an auxiliary member, got together 26 dealers from all over California and put on
Antique dealers.
Antique dealers, yeah. And it was American primitive antiques, and it was highly successful, and it was our first big fundraiser. And Jerry was there spinning her
my wheels.
spinning her wheels.
I was spinning wool.
And we're going to do it again in June on June 7th from 10 to 5 on a Sunday afternoon. It's a great antique show, food, music. The music was wonderful last year. So we hope that we get a lot of people to come to this. We're going to have more dealers this year, and Jerry, who is leaving Los Altos tomorrow morning at the crack of dawn to move up to Oregon, and we shall miss you,
Well, I'll bring my wool back.
is coming
and my
back to
spinning
be in the show. So we're real happy about
Great,
that.
great. Do you want to take a shot of that
Sure.
poster? And
There are really good dealers there, antique dealers, and marvelous pieces and items. And it was very appropriate for the History House.
well, along with this, besides coming to these kinds of events, what kinds of things can the community do to support the efforts of the auxiliary?
Well, you know, as I mentioned, Marion Jackson, when we had our tea, she supported us by letting us use her clothes, by coming to the fundraisers, and by joining the auxiliary. It's only $5 to become an active member.
Mm-hmm.
And pop over some of the times when the house is open to look at the exhibits. There's always a changing exhibit there. There's a more or less permanent exhibit that gives a general history of Los Altos, but they're a changing exhibit, a rotating.
Yeah, we have a good exhibit in there right now. It's from the Lace Museum in Mountain View, and it's called Lavender and Old Lace, and it will be in there through April. And so we've cooperated with that museum, and it's a good one.
Well, I think that's an important thing to note, that that perhaps some folks in our audience have been to the museum before and thought that they've seen it all, and it's constantly about how often do they change the...
We try to change them about every 4 months, and it's pretty ambitious because it's a lot of work. But
well, I know that I've taken Cub Scouts there, besides my own family and the various events we've gone to. We've taken Cub Scouts there and let them look up things about the history of Los Altos. And I think it's an excellent opportunity for people, and a lot of people in our community don't even know that it exists. Can you tell us where it's located, Pinky?
It's at 51 South San Antonio, right behind the library. And we're open on Wednesdays and Saturday afternoons, or by appointment. So we would like to see everybody there.
So basically like a scout troop or
Sure.
a brownie troop or something like that could call up and make
Yeah, we can
arrangements
accommodate maybe 15 going through with one docent.
Oh, it's great. I think the most rewarding thing is when the children come through, and when some of the older residents, too, who have been there and give you some of their memories. And if some of the older residents would give us some of their stories, that helps a lot with putting together some of the facts.
A fun thing happened. I got a call from a man the other day who has had, well, he graduated from the Los Altos Grammar School in 1944, and he wanted to give his friend for his birthday a frame that goes around a license plate. So in the process of getting one made, he had to have 200. And it says Los Altos Grammar School. And he's giving us the frames so we can sell and use them as a fundraiser.
Oh, great.
Well, that's
great.
good. And he said, too, at that point, he has a lot of photographs and things that he will donate to the house. So it's gradual, but it's happening.
Right.
One of the things that the late Kay Daly was very interested in is a valuable aspect of our archival materials. She was very interested in seeing that people record histories and their memories, so that if someone does have memories like that, they're invited to call us up to get a time when they can come down maybe and tell us some of those, or somebody could go out. That'd be, because those are good. We love to cross-reference all the time.
You had mentioned, Jerry, that one of the ways that people can be involved is if they come across particular kinds of artifacts or
Yes.
things that speak of the history of Los Altos.
That are pertinent.
That they could be donated in their name and held at the museum. What about, I assume you also accept cash donations?
Yes. We can be persuaded very easily to accept cash. And some, the value of cash donations is that you can dedicate them, a person can dedicate them towards a certain type of purchase. There are always things that are needed. We've been finishing up the kitchen. They've done a beautiful job the auxiliary's done a beautiful job on the kitchen, doing a circa 1900, 1910 kitchen. And there are things that are needed. Sometimes a screen might be needed to protect a quilt that we have in the archival room. There are things that are necessary that there isn't room for in the city budget. And we've been very lucky to have the city even give us a museum.
Right.
That's one thing
and to help maintain it.
And to support it. And that's why I'm so grateful to Audrey for that. I think she's the one that really got them.
But one thing you had mentioned brought to mind that one of the things that my children, who I grew up back in Kansas and was involved in going to my grandparents' farm and seeing the ice box and the old coal stove and those kind of things. My children have never dreamt of anything like that, and they were fascinated to walk into that kitchen and to ask questions about all those things, and to have a docent, explaining that the Iceman brought the ice and put the block of ice in here, and my youngest says, "Oh, just like when we go camping."
The Federated Women's Club donated the icebox, and I found the stove at a garage sale,
Is that right?
and it was donated.
You know, a fun thing to look for too is if you go into the pantry, there's a wonderful old-fashioned pantry there. As I say, the house is so original. And down near the floor are some drawers that you pull out, and you can see that J. Gilbert Smith cut boxes, the lug boxes.
For the apricots,
For the apricots, and his name is stamped on the side, and that is just really delightful. But that man was marvelous. He built the house, took care of his mother, and I'm sure she helped take care of him. And he started the orchard, and those orchards are part of our heritage. And those orchards, the trees that are remaining around City Hall have got to stay there. They're just delightful. Do you know how, when we moved here 25, 27 years ago, everybody's front lawn had an apricot tree on it, or two or three, and they've gradually been gone. How many of the orchards are left? Very, very few, and yet that was a large part of Los Altos with the fruit trees and prunes.
Well, It's my understanding, correct
And
me if
that
I'm wrong,
was-
Pinky, but isn't it true that the orchard itself surrounding City Hall there has been designated
Oh,
a
yeah.
historical
Yes.
site?
The Historical Commission really had the foresight to do that. And if one of the trees dies, they replant it with another tree.
I know that the orchard is sort of leased by someone who
Yeah,
comes and,
and
takes the
discs,
fruit and,
yeah.
dries it, uses it.
We're not supposed to steal them, but one of the things I can remember is probably the only city hall in the whole country where you can go up and on your way into a town meeting, pick a ripe apricot.
Take an apricot.
Don't get caught.
I can remember going to a city council meeting around the time that they were getting ripe, and there were little signs hung on them that says,
Yeah.
please do not
Don't
pick.
pick.
These are
Pick
owned
these-
by someone.
Right. But is there anything so good as a juicy
Oh,
apricot ripe on the tree? Oh my goodness.
Well, we were talking about fundraisers a while ago, and I understand that recently there was a wedding that was held on the grounds of
Yeah,
the...
it was the
Yes.
first wedding that we've ever tried because we weren't sure if it would work, and it was wonderful. The weather was good. We can only handle that kind of thing outside. We just aren't set up in the house. But there were 75 guests, and we had music, and they really had a good time.
You can't
and
have a
we
large
are
one.
now working with the Parks and Rec and city staff to see how we'll work out the use of the grounds.
I think it's a beautiful resource there to let the public use as long as it's controlled.
Right.
And it just exposes more and more people
And
to...
for a group that's appropriate to it. It wouldn't serve for a large group. It
Right,
wouldn't,
right.
Or too huge a group, but it works out well for a smaller wedding, romantic wedding. It's just great.
Well, I think you told us where the History House is located, behind the library there. Can you tell us what hours it's normally open and maybe a phone number that people could call if they wanted?
Well, it's open on Wednesdays from 1 to 5 and on Saturdays from 12 to 4. And if anyone is interested, they can call City Hall and ask for Sherry Lombach, who is our liaison
Right.
to the city and the Historical Commission. And then she gets us in touch with whoever made the call. So if anyone wants to come in on another day, that's fine. Or if they want to have a small meeting in the house, that's always a possibility too. The Garden Club does meet there once in a while in the summertime.
Well, we just have a few moments left. Could you, one of you, whoever would like to answer, just briefly give us an indication of how the auxiliary relates to the Historical Commission itself?
Well, the auxiliary, anything that we want to do, we clear through the commission, who in turn have to go through the city. But anything, we can pretty much, if we have maintenance things that have to be done, we go through the commission. Yeah, or any large things that have been donated have to go through the commission.
And this the potential curator.
Right.
is something that
Yeah,
works.
exactly. We're working with the commission.
Well, we certainly want to thank you, Jerry, and you, Pinky, for being our guests today. And we want to thank you for being with us on Los Altos History. We hope that you will join us again for our future programs. Some of the things we've talked about today are programs that we would like to, or things that we'd like to have programs on in the future. We hope that you've enjoyed our program and will want to get involved in the History House Auxiliary, and certainly will want to spend some time over at History House acquainting yourself and your family with the history of this beautiful community that we live in. Thank you for being with us.